Welcome guys, I'm Gio here, hope you're having a great day, and this is another video in a series about RxJS. In this video we talk about observables because observables are core data structure in RxJS library, and everything inside this library evolves around observables. So it's critical to understand what observable is, how it works, and once we have this foundation, then we can move on and understand the other things like operators and how they work, how they transform the observables, and how they combine different observables, and all of that. So let's jump right into the code and start working with observables. Before I start writing the RxJS specific code, I want you to see my setup here in case you want to replicate what I'm doing in your machine, in your environment. It's one of the ways that you can do it, and it's very simple. I have package.json here, and as you see, the only dependency that I have is HTTP server. It's so I can just start the local server, and then I have two files, index where I have some HTML tags and my main.js where our scripts will run. Also, if you take a look at this, I have included RxJS from CDN. It's a very simple way, very straightforward way, so we don't lose the time on package management and build scripts and all of that, and we will just go straight to RxJS and start working with it. So this is my setup, and it's very simple. We can think about the observables like regular functions that can return different values over time. Now, if we can think about them like functions, then the question is how we create one. And it's very easy, and we're just gonna do that. Here it is. We have our first observable. It's not gonna do anything. We can check our page here. If we refresh this, no changes, no console log, nothing is changing. So as I've said before, we can think about the observables like a functions, and as a functions, if we don't call them, they're not going to do anything. And same is with observables. It's just sitting there waiting to be executed. Now, how do we execute it, the observable, and how can we call it? Well, let me show you that. Here it is. We execute our observable just by subscribing to it, and we pass in our function where we receive the values that will be returned from the observable. Let's check our page and see how it works. As you see, there is some small change here. We have got the message just observable, and it means that our observable has been executed. And that is true. We have our log here. So before we called this, nothing happened. And now as we have called it, we are getting this function executed inside. So this observable, we have managed to execute this, but in our subscription, nothing happened. Well, that's because our observable doesn't return anything. It doesn't emit any values. So we're going to fix that right now. Let's check the result. And as you see, we have received the message, got the value. And there is 1 because we have returned the 1 from this observable. And this is how we emit the values. For our observable constructor here, when we pass this function, the logic that has to be executed as observable gets executed, we receive subscriber, and then we can return or get the new values to subscriber by calling the next. Now, if I add another call here, let's say add 2, in this case, this call will receive 1 and 2. Let's make another call. Now let's check our example. And as you see, we have got just observable twice, and then the results 1 and 2 twice. Now there is some key point here that I want you to understand, and this is where a lot of people miss the point of observables, and they think about the observables like event emitter or something like this. Now, when we call subscribe, when we execute our observable, this function here will be executed for each our subscription. So if I call this again, if I copy this and make this call again, this will be executed again. So if you have some heavy calculation here or some complex operation, just remember that every time someone calls this observable, this logic here will be executed, like in case of functions. And when we call some function, its logic is going to be executed for every call. This is the same with observables. We can alter this behavior, but we will learn about this in the future. So this is a very, very crucial point to remember. To prove the point, let's observe our results here. Refresh the page, and as you see, we have received just observable once and just observable second time because we have two subscriptions and this logic executed twice. Now, I said before that we can think about the observable like a function that can return multiple values, but you can object by saying that, function can also return multiple values just by returning an array, and inside the array we can have many values. That is certainly true, but with observables we can return values over time. So it's not necessary for us to return values 1 and 2 immediately. We can return values over time. Let's use timeout for that. Let's check the result. And as you see, we have received just observable twice, and then 1 and 2, and then we have received the 1 later because in our observable we return this value 1 second later. Let's just return the 3 here. And as you see, we are waiting, and then we've got this. Okay, let's set some delay, and let's check this again. And as you see, that's how it is working. We have returned the value 3, but at a later time. At this point, you might think that this is not some benefit for that, but it can really be once you start to understand how they work together, how the observables work together, and how the operators work, and combine the observables. You can have very complex logic here. You can make some HTTP calls, you can listen to some WebSocket connections and all of that, and all of this can be hidden behind the observable. And as for the observers, these calls will be just using the same interface. So the just observable call here, the first call and the second one, isn't concerned about what's going on behind it, and we can have some simple call here. We can make some requests and do all sorts of things, and they will be just waiting the values. They might receive 0 values or more values depending on the logic of our observable, and they can receive values over time at different points of time, and they can then decide what to do with it. And that's one of the benefits that we can see right away. Now let's make this observable a bit more complex and return numbers from 1 to infinity. Okay, let's check the example first. And it is working. We are getting the numbers from 1 to up to infinity, and then we just log these values. And what we have done here is very simple. We have interval, and after 1 second we update the I and just return this, and our subscriber is listening to that. And I have just commented this out so we can see the clear results here in the console. It demonstrates that we can return many different values over time. Now let's think about this call. Okay, we are making this call, we are subscribing to Observable, it starts executing and we are getting values. Now at a certain point in time we might decide that we don't want to listen to further values, that we don't care about them, so we need to stop listening to it. How can we do that? Well, it's very easy. Let me show you that. Whenever we subscribe to Observable, we receive a subscription. This call results in a subscription, and we are storing this into subs variable. And subscription has unsubscribe method. And once we call the unsubscribe, the subscriber isn't going to receive any more values. It will basically stop listening to it. So how can we demonstrate that? Well, let's say that if we receive value 2 or 3, then we want to stop observing this observable and just stop. So let's do this. Let's check the result. And as you see, it seems to be working, but something isn't right. As we have seen, we have got the 1, 2, and 3. This was expected because here when we reached the 3, when Observable returns 3, we say that, okay, I don't want to continue listening to it. I don't want to receive further values. So we have used unsubscribe, and it seems to be working because in our console here, we didn't receive, any more values. But if we look closely, console says that about to return a new value. It seems that for some reason this interval is still working, even though we have unsubscribed from it. And it is logging this. That's the exact message we are looking here. Even though subscriber isn't interested in values anymore, Observable is still going, and that is problem. How can we solve that? Inside the Observable, whenever we have complex logic, we can return a function, a cleanup function, that will take care of releasing the resources after Observable is not listened anymore. So let's do just that. Okay, let's check the result again. And it's done. Interval is no longer going. We have cleaned up our Observable and it's working fine. So let's recap what we have learned so far. We can think about observables like functions. As a function, every time we subscribe to Observable, it is going to be executed for every subscription unless we use some special operators, which we will get into later. And this is crucial to remember. It's very, very important. So if you have some complex calculation here or some complex operations like making some calls or listening to a WebSocket connection and so on, you should know that this logic will be executed for every subscription like we have demonstrated here. Another key characteristic of observables is that we can return values over time. It means that subscribers doesn't have to be aware of the internal logics. There can be some processes that take some time but eventually return the values or many values over time, and this makes observables very, very flexible. And also we have to remember that when we write the observable function, we have to return cleanup function, and the cleanup function will be executed whenever a subscriber decides to unsubscribe. So here we should put some cleanup logic, maybe cancel the ongoing HTTP request or close WebSocket connection or stop the execution of some computation. It doesn't matter. The key thing here is that we always have to provide some cleanup function, and we have to make sure that any resources that are being used by Observable are released at the time when we unsubscribe. And again, this will be executed for every call that we make here. Okay, that's it for this video. We have covered basics but very crucial points about the observables, and in the future videos we will expand our knowledge and see how they work together with operators, how we can represent different things as observables, even though you might think that all of this is useless right now, but we'll get to there. I just want to make sure that we take small steps so we don't have the gaps in understanding of RxJS. As I've said before, it's a complex library, so we don't have to rush things. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Click the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends.